I'm
see
sure you
Rex.
guys
Yeah,
found
yeah,
it
yeah.
on the boat.
Okay.
It's running.
Yes. So, we had a good swim.
You're taping this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Must tape Georgi, see?
So please, no, don't
You
worry.
can kill the tape after he gets through.
Of course. Then you can delete it, right?
Go ahead.
So welcome everybody for the Beachnote. So we have this concept here of the SAMOS conference, which was basically borrowed from the idea of some famous ancient Greeks that used to live on that island. I always forget the name, but I am sure Yale will remind me. Who was the third famous Greek except of Stamatis and Manolis Katevenis. I keep forgetting that name. And 4 years ago, so you too?
Me too.
Okay, you too. We are old then. Good. 4 years ago we started this tradition, and we please find some spots. There should be enough places. Don't worry. There is one. And always we have a technical topic, right? And
Right.
as the tradition says, we are honored to have Yale Patt here to give the fourth Beachnote of the SAMOS conference. And we are thinking of having a technical topic again. Yale was proposing to have a topic about how to build a supercomputer. But then he said himself, yes, but in order to build a supercomputer you have to be an arrogant. And we cannot ask such a humble guy as Yale to give an arrogant keynote, right?
Right.
And that's why we decided to have a less technical topic that may turn out to be more technical than the one of the last year. So, we're honored to have Yale here, so Yale, audience is yours.
So it's also the case that Alex is going to teach you how to build a supercomputer
Tomorrow.
morning.
Good.
I should also not waste this opportunity to tell you that we're going to have two panels tomorrow, after the end of tomorrow and the end of Wednesday. And the title of the panel this year is going to be Open Mic, which means we will discuss whatever topics you want to discuss. And so if you're interested in discussing a topic at the panel, you should either let me or Trevor Mudge, who will be showing up sometime this afternoon, know sometime between now and tomorrow morning, between tomorrow's coffee break. If you have a topic related to whatever you want, Moore's Law, multi-core, other nonsense, whatever, if you let me or Trevor know, we will figure out what the topics will be. But we will pick topics from what you all recommend. Now we have a Beachnote. The Beachnote is because you failed to say, Stamatis always wanted a keynote on the beach. Like Socrates used to walk the beach. You know, Socrates never would have gotten tenure because he never published anything, but his student Plato did, see? The problem with giving a keynote on the beach is that most people who give keynotes are tied to this PowerPoint nonsense. And so nobody would volunteer, and so finally after Stamatis passed away and I finally started coming to this conference, people told me about this and I said, yes, I am foolish enough to give a talk on the beach without the benefit of PowerPoint. Right? They want me to drink ouzo. Unfortunately, if I drink ouzo... No. Good. I should also say that the Beachnote is not by me, but by me and Captain Giannis, who, if tradition serves, will interrupt whenever he feels like interrupting. So this time I was asked by a couple of people who know a story about me if I would recount that story. It's not technical. Instead of doing a technical talk about multi-core or whatever. So it has to do with welfare. Now, I don't know about your country whether you have this notion of welfare. In fact, before I start, I should ask, in your country, do you have the provision for taking care of people who are not able to take care of themselves by holding a job and working? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes, you do. And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Mostly a
To
good
be
thing.
able to have the government take your hard-earned wages and redistribute it to people who don't have a job so that they can live in some shelter and eat and not starve to death. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing.
If they cannot work, then it's good.
If they cannot,
If they really cannot work.
if they really cannot work, it's good. All right. So how many people think that it's good, and how many people think that it's bad? This redistribution of wealth, of taking your money and giving it to this person who is not well enough to work, but he's well enough to stand in line to pick up his income every month. Who thinks it's a good thing to do? And who thinks it's a bad thing to do?
Wow.
I'm sorry?
Case by case.
Case by case. So and this is an engineering community too, so this is very surprising. Most engineering communities were like me, see? So I am the son of immigrants from Eastern Europe, came to the U.S., no money at all, very poor, but my father held a job. Not enough to put steak on the table, but enough to put chicken on the table sometimes. And they had 3 children, and all of us, worked hard. I was the first person from my neighborhood to go to college. My brother was the second person from the neighborhood to go to college. My sister was the third person from the neighborhood to go to college. And you come away from that experience thinking that you don't need welfare. You just need strength of your own resolve. And so I went to engineering school, and I was able to pick up a fellowship to one of these big deal fancy universities for my PhD, and pretty much successful. At one point I was teaching at North Carolina State University, and most of my friends at North Carolina State were not engineers, because engineers in the South tend to be a little bit more conservative than I tend to be. So my friends were mostly humanities people, social science people. And the subject of welfare came up, and the rest of them said, welfare is good. And I said, no, welfare is bad. Because if you pay somebody not to work, he will be lazy and he just won't work, And I made it. Everybody can make it. And they said, no, you're wrong. So I said, how can they say I'm wrong? I'm Yale Patt. I'm never wrong, right? You guys know that. So I said, I'll prove to you that if you want to work, the world will open its path to you, and there's no reason to have welfare, because if you want to work, there is a job waiting for you. I said, pick a city, any city in the U.S. I hope you'll pick a city that's not too cold. And what I will do during the Christmas vacation is I will go to that city, I'll get off the airplane, I'll take the limousine into the city, and I will assume a new identity for the whole Christmas break, 3 weeks. And during those 3 weeks, I will pretend to be, this was some time ago, I was about, I was about 30 years old at the time. I will pretend to be a high school graduate, an honorable discharge from the U.S. Army, but no work experience. I've been just on welfare, picking up my check every month. And I will prove to you that if I try to get a job, everybody will be hiring me, and 3 weeks later I will come back to North Carolina, a success story. So they picked the city. I won't tell you what city it is, it's not important. I went to the city, I flew in, landed, took the limousine into the downtown area, found a cheap rooming house where I could get a room for $2 US a night. $2 US, that's what? That's 2.5 real, or 1.5 euros, I guess, at this point, huh? Or one pound sterling maybe, or something. Yeah, so $2 a night. And then I set about to get a job. Because I'm an American. Self-reliant. And my parents started with nothing, so, you know, and they provided for me, and I was able to make something of myself, so should be, in the U.S. we say a slam dunk. You have that in Europe also, slam dunk? You don't know that expression? No.
Basketball.
Huh?
Huh?
It's a basketball expression. Not everybody follows basketball. No. You don't follow basketball? No. It means piece of cake. You understand piece of cake? Yeah, that one you do. That one you follow. Yeah. So I would get up in the morning, I would get a cup of coffee, I would buy the newspaper, I would go through the help wanted ads, and I would circle the jobs that I thought that I had a chance of getting. Stock clerk in a factory or a supermarket. Orderly in a hospital, emptying bedpans. And then I would just systematically go to each one of these places to get a job. So I have a question for you. So how many of these jobs could I check out in a single day? How many? 10. Right? Who says 10? 10. Right? 5. So when I check out, how many? Ollie, you have a number? 1.
3.
3. So 1 to 10 we got the most. So let's look at 10 for example. So 10 is a good answer. It means I have a limousine pick me up and take me to the company, and I walk in and I say, I'm here for a job, show me to the interviewer right now. Yes, sir. And they take me to the interviewer, and I have the interview, and they either say yes or no. And then I go back to my limousine, and it takes me to the next job. 10. Or what I have to do is somehow get to the place by bus or walking. And when I finally get there, I have to stand in line before I talk to the person at the front, who then hands me an application to fill out. And then I turn in the application, and then I sit and wait for a couple of hours before they finally will talk to me. So the correct answer is like maybe 2, or on a good day, 3.
Woo.
And so the business of this Beachnote today is the experiences I had in finding a job. How difficult do you think it was to find a job?
I don't think you found one.
So actually I did find one, exactly one, and I did this every day for most of the 3 weeks. Unfortunately, the woman who was going to offer me a job as an orderly in a very small hospital, they had an opening for 1, as opposed to a very big hospital where they had an opening for many, but when I came in and filled out the application, the woman said, no, we cannot give you a job. I said, why not? She says, well, we filled all our jobs. Now, the truth of the matter was I had no stable job record, so I was trying to get off of welfare. And what I had not realized was that as a boy, going to school and doing all the right things, I was playing the game. Whereas as an adult trying to get off welfare, I wasn't playing the game. I had been just a bum, and so I had no stable job record. So with no stable job record, nobody would be willing to give me a job. And even though they had a full-page ad and lots of openings, we filled them all, which is nonsense. The one woman in a very small hospital said, I would love to give you a chance, but we only had an opening for 1, and we've already hired him earlier this morning, but I will take your name down because we get a lot of turnover. And unfortunately, when she called me to offer me the job, because they did have the turnover, I was in jail, so I could not get the phone call, and so therefore I did not get the job. Right? So the answer is, with all those interviews, I had 1 success, but I couldn't follow through because I was in jail when she called. And so the jail story, that's another story. So I don't know which stories to tell you. I can tell you the story of Mrs. Mincy. I finally decided the thing to do would be to go to the Texas State Employment Commission. Whoops, I told you the state where this city was in. I didn't tell you the city. I will keep the city from you. Thank you. Can't even keep track of my water.
But at least the state now we know.
Now you know the state. And I can't hold my water either, so that's another problem we have. So Mrs. Mincy, she had me fill out the forms, and then she calls me in and she says, I cannot get you a 40-hour job. You have no stable job record. But I can get you a job pumping gasoline, petrol, for 10 hours a week. And if you will do that every day faithfully for 4 years, then I can get you a full-time job. And I looked at her, and I was very careful not to belie my education. And I looked at her and I said, beg your pardon, ma'am, I'm on welfare and I'm not proud. I am 30 years old. I don't have 4 more years to waste. And she looked at me squarely in the eye. This is now my representative on the State Employment Commission. And she said, I don't know why not. You've wasted the first 30 years of your life. What difference does 4 or more make? That's true. So, Yogi, you've heard the story before. What other part? Oh, so another thing that's interesting is the haves and the have-nots, which I'm delighted to hear most of you say we should have welfare, because one of the things I noticed in this 3 weeks was that the have-nots would give you the shirt off their back. The guy had enough for 1 beer, and he would buy me a beer, and then he would share the beer with me, half a glass for him and half a glass for me. But the haves wanted to have nothing to do with you. I met this woman, and I was trying to get a job in this supermarket, and she overheard me. She said, my friend is a manager of another supermarket. How about if I drive you over to him? He will give you a job, this poor woman. So she drove me to the other guy, and of course he wouldn't give me a job because he was in charge of the supermarket. Yeah. So I guess the jail story is probably worth telling, huh? Yeah. So how did I get in jail? So it turns out that I was bothered by the fact I could only do 2 interviews a day because you have to get to the interview. So I said, I know what I'll do, I'll hitchhike. And so it turns out that there's a city ordinance that you're not allowed to hitchhike on the street of this city. You can hitchhike on the sidewalk, but there aren't too many cars that go on the sidewalk. So that was problematic. So I get on the street and I got my thumb out, and the first car that comes by is the police. And they take me off to jail. I said, what did I do wrong? He says, oh, wise guy, huh? Boom. So they haul me in front of this guy, and he says, $25 or 5 days in jail. So I said, well, if I'm serious about this experiment, I have no choice. Now that was an education, being in jail. Guess I could go on for an hour about the jail, except that he's going to want to serve dinner pretty soon. Or lunch, depending on your perception. You know, I really wish Stamatis was here, because he would, Stamatis, I hope you listen. So I did get an education in jail. In fact, there was one guy who was in there waiting to be dispensed with, and he was a hardened criminal. And what he did with the rest of us who were in there on these, fluke charges to keep the riffraff in line, he went one by one and told us what we did wrong. Okay? That would have gotten us out. It would have kept us from getting out of jail. In fact, there was one guy who was in there because a woman was on the train and she left her ticket to get off the train. He grabs the ticket and then gets off the train, and then feels the arm of the law. And the guy says, "Where'd you get that ticket?" He says, "It's mine." So they arrested him, locked him up. And the teacher of us, he said, no. As soon as he put his arm on you, he knew that you had stolen the ticket. The correct answer is not that it's mine. It belongs to that woman who left it on the train, and I'm getting off the train to give her back her ticket. See? He wouldn't have had the ticket, but he wouldn't have ended up in jail. So we had this school by the hardened criminal teaching us. With me, he said, you didn't have to stick your thumb out. That's all you had to do was be at the side of the road. Anybody driving by knows you need a ride. You don't need to stick your thumb out. Sticking your thumb out is an opportunity for the police to take you off to jail. So I did get out of jail. The woman I met.
Not in jail, right?
No. This was, so I was walking, because I was walking, how else would I get from A to B? So I'm crossing the street, and this gorgeous blonde, just breathtaking, and she pulls up to the traffic light, and I smile at her, she smiles back at me. And then I walk around, and we start talking. She pulls over to the side, I get in her car, and we sit there at the side of the road talking. She finally, and I explained to her who I am, which is Amos Patterson, and I'm out of work, and I'm looking for work, and because I'm tired of being a bum. And she says, "Can I drive you anyplace?" I said, "Sure, drive me to my cheap rooming house, where I was paying $2 a night to spend the night." And so we pull up and we talk for another hour, and I get her phone number. Because I'm a guy, and even though you saw me wearing the purple shirt this morning, I'm a guy, right? Yeah. So then I call her that evening, and I say, we should get together. And she said, no. I said, no, but we connect, we communicate, we're good together. She said, no. I said, why not? She says, I will be honest with you. I really enjoyed the time talking to you, but when I got home, my mother called and we had a conversation, and I told her about this neat guy that I just met, and I described you to her, and my mother said, no, I don't want you to ever speak to him again, so I certainly can't go out with you. So I was, I'm a guy, think fast, So I said, well, look, she was a nurse at the big hospital, actually. I said, what time do you get off work? She said, how about if I meet you at the hospital after you get out work and we have dinner together in the hospital cafeteria? Bright lights, lots of people. Nothing wrong with that. Right. So she said, yeah, that sounds like it could be okay. So I went there. We had dinner together. We sat and talked for hours until they finally had to close up the place and kick me out. And it felt good,
Lucky you, she didn't call the mother in the meantime.
There were no mobile.
She did the next day. Then I called her again, and she said, I spoke to my mother and I told her how a wonderful dinner we had, and she was furious. Absolutely furious with me. And she made me promise to never see you again. So I can never see you again. I said, if this is what you have to do, then I guess this is what you have to do, but I think we're good together, and okay. So we hung up. And then the 3 weeks continued, and I ended up in jail. I ended up getting out of jail. And then I went to see the city manager, by the way. I don't know if I ever told you this one. So I went to the city manager to explain to him the problems they had in their jail. And he didn't want to listen. No. He said, look, these people are in jail, you know. Our job is to just, you know, not think about them, you know. Ugh. In fact, there was one guy who was in jail for resisting arrest. He had come home after being away late at night. He was semi-intoxicated. He couldn't find his key, so he broke into his own apartment. The neighbor next door called the police. The police came to arrest him. He said, this is my own apartment. And they insisted on arresting him, and he wouldn't go willingly. So they arrested him. Then they found out it was his own apartment that he was breaking into, and so they dropped the charges for breaking into his own apartment, but they kept the charges for resisting arrest, and so he was in jail for 3 weeks for resisting arrest. That's a side story. Oh, one thing that's important that you need to hear is I'm a guy. Now, it's getting to the point where you can't genderize this anymore, but back then you could, because women in those days didn't have to work. They could do volunteer work, they could get married, they could be a homemaker. Today, pretty much everybody works, but in those days, a woman, you didn't raise a little girl that she had to work. Little boys you raise, you have to work. What? He's getting ready. Okay, so I got to finish this one, and then I have to finish the story about the girl, and then that'll be the end of it. We raise little boys, and we have for a long time, with the idea that if you don't work, then you're not a man. And so here I am. I would spend the whole day, and I would go to a job interview and be unsuccessful, go to another job interview and be unsuccessful, and at the end of the day, I haven't accomplished anything. I was an associate professor of electrical engineering at the time at a major U.S. university, but I couldn't get a job. And so that really eats at you and gives you a sense of, wow. So what I used to smoke cigars in those days. What I used to do every so often would be, during those 3 weeks, was go to the, we call it 7-Eleven. It's like a fast place. Buy a big cigar, go back to my rooming house, and smoke the cigar to remind myself that I was really an associate professor and not somebody out of work trying to get a job. That's the game it plays on your head if you're not able to find work. Which, in our economy today, we're finding a lot of people that are identifying with that. The last thing I'll tell you, and then I guess he's had enough, is the woman. So I couldn't go back to North Carolina without, because the thing with her was just too good. So what I did is I called her again, and I said, I know you told me you never want to speak to me again. I really need to tell you something. It'll take a half hour, and I promise that if you'll half hour, and I'll never bother you again. She said, okay. Came, she picked me up, we went to a Denny's, which is a cheap coffee place in the U.S. She says, okay, what is it? She says, my name is Patterson, it's Yale Patt, and I'm an associate professor of electrical engineering at North Carolina State University, and I'm doing this experiment. And I went through it with her for a half hour, and I said, now, you drive me back to your, to my cheap hotel room, and I will not bother you again. And so she did. And there I was, lying on my bed in the cheap hotel room, and the phone rang. Now the phone is not in my room, of course. It's a cheap hotel, so it's a pay phone that's in the hallway, of course, you know. Phone rings, middle of the day, I answer it, and it's her. My parents want to know whether you can come to dinner tonight. She comes and she picks me up, and we go to her place, and as she pulls into the driveway of her parents' home, her father opens the door, he puts his arm around me and says, what do you drink? Do you like 25-year-old Scotch whiskey? And he takes me to his liquor cabinet. And That's the end of my story.
But what is the conclusion?
Now there are
of-
many more parts of the story. I could go on for hours, but you'd rather eat than listen to me.
No, but what did you learn from that
So
story?
what I learned from that was that welfare is. So what I learned from that was something that you guys all answered right at the beginning, because I started the experiment that I was going to prove that I was right and all you do-gooders were wrong. And what I learned from that is that if you start the ball game right from day one, doing all the right things, the system will beat a path to your door. But if you don't, and then you want to change, very hard to get back on the right track. The system will look, and in fact, in my case, I think it was quite simple. You have no stable job record. How can we possibly give you a job with the catch-22? Okay, so I'm done, Georgi, or what?
Yes, you're done. Thank
And
you.
Captain Giannis did not interrupt me the whole time?
Of course.
I love you too, man.